Good evening, everyone. My name is Kyle Clears. I use he, him pronouns. I am the Associate Director of the Kaufman Interfaith Institute here at Grand Valley State University in West Michigan. In the spirit of community and togetherness as we gather together, I invite you to make use of the chat feature to offer your name and perhaps where you are joining us from or watching from this evening. On behalf of the Kaufman Interfaith Institute and Odyssey Impact, welcome to our Stranger Sister film screening and discussion. The Kaufman Interfaith Institute is a unit within the Division of Inclusion and Equity at Grand Valley State University. In promoting interfaith understanding and mutual respect, the Kaufman Institute offers a broad range of programming, over 200 events and initiatives each year that seek to create a more inclusive and equitable West Michigan community for persons of diverse cultural, religious, secular, and spiritual identities. As we begin our time together, we pause to acknowledge the land on which we are virtually gathering and hosting this event here in West Michigan. We recognize the people of the three fires, the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi peoples, on whose land we are gathered. The three fires people are indigenous to this land, which means that this is their ancestral territory. Every university, congregation, institution, business, and monument here in West Michigan is built on stolen native land. We are guests on their land, and one way to practice right relations is to develop genuine ways to acknowledge the histories and traditions of the people who originated here first, who are still here, and who tend to the land always. As we make this land acknowledgement, we know it is but an important first step, and that there are many more that we need to take when we decide to engage in the important work of social justice and equity. Now, before we jump into the film, in that spirit, it's important to note that what we are about to see will inevitably impact us differently. For some of us, this film and the discussion may feel very intense, heavy, perhaps very personal. Recognizing that, I encourage you all to take care of yourselves, to monitor your response, and if you feel overwhelmed, get regrounded with your feet flat on the floor. Look around and check out your surroundings, including behind you. You may find it helpful to consciously breathe in and out 3 times, making sure you breathe out for 1 count longer. Our plan for the evening is to watch the film together. When the film concludes, we are going to let the credits play all the way through, and we're hoping that you'll use that space as a time for us to all take a breath, maybe stretch, reflect, and digest this powerful story. I'll then bring us back for our panel discussion and Q&A to follow. So without further ado, friends, stranger sister, welcome back. Once again, so glad you have all tuned into this evening's discussion. Since this space is designed to foster understanding and dialogue, I'd like to offer a couple housekeeping reminders. Please do make use of the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Our moderator will start the conversation with panelists with some opening questions that we have prepared. We also want to leave time for questions from you all, our attendees, so feel free to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. I will be organizing what comes in and passing them on to Jenny, our moderator, who will try and get to as many of your questions as possible. I'd also like to once again draw your attention to the chat at the bottom of your screen. We've disabled that for attendees, but we'll now be using that throughout this event to share links and resources referenced by our panelists. So be sure to check that out through our time together. And especially at the end, we're going to be inundating you with some really good resources. So be watching for that. At this point, it's my sincere honor and pleasure to introduce our moderator for this session, Dr. Jennifer Howe Peace. Jennifer Peace is currently a senior advisor for the Pluralism Project at Harvard University and a senior researcher at the Tisch College of Civic Life at Tufts University, where she's working on a new curricular track at the intersections of religious diversity and civic life. Dr. Peace has been an interfaith activist for over 2 decades and has founded multiple organizations for the promotion of interfaith understanding and is the author or editor of numerous publications, including the award-winning My Neighbor's Faith, Stories of Interreligious Encounter, Growth, and Transformation. Jennifer, thank you so much for being with us. I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you so much, Kyle, and thank you to the Kaufman Interfaith Institute, and thank you to all of you who are participating tonight. It really means a lot to see how many folks have come out for this conversation, and I think you're gonna really appreciate hearing from our filmmaker and panelists in this next portion of our conversation. So let me start by introducing our wonderful panelists. Kirsten Kelly is an Emmy-winning documentary filmmaker whose work has been supported by the Sundance Institute, the MacArthur Foundation, and the Lilly Endowment. She is senior producer with Odyssey Impact and works on various independent film projects of her own as well. She grew up on a fruit and vegetable farm in Western Michigan, went to Calvin, and went on to graduate from the Juilliard School Master Directing Program. She lives in Brooklyn with her husband, her 10-year-old son, and her very energetic shepherd pup, who I'd like to meet someday. Sheryl Olitzky is the co-founder of the Sisterhood of Salaam Shalom and founding executive director. Sheryl took the grassroots organization from one chapter to over 150, from a local movement in New Jersey to one that is now throughout North America and in Germany. A recognized leader in peace building, Sheryl has had a long career in leadership roles in for-profit and nonprofit organizations. And Atiya Aftab is also the co-founder of the Sisterhood of Salaam Shalom, as well as an attorney, an educator, and an activist. In addition, she's an adjunct professor at Rutgers University, chairs the Muslim chaplaincy on campus, and is part of the Rutgers Interfaith Alliance. Welcome to each of you. So grateful you could be with us after that powerful film. I've seen it several times, and every time I see it, I'm moved again and find new insight and inspiration in it. So without further ado, I want to turn to some questions that we're starting with, and I look forward to seeing what questions those of you participating who viewed this have for us as well. And Kirsten, I'm curious, I want to start with you actually and ask what led you to work on this film? And then for Sheryl and Atiya, what was that like to work with the filmmakers in telling this story?
Yeah, you know, I will say, like, in the fall of 2016, in amongst all of the chaos in the election, and just there was so much happening in the world, and there was just felt like so much negativity, and a lot of the stories and the news that was really coming out was very fraught. And my film partner on this project, Katie, and I, we were looking for a project to do together, and we love to focus on women-centered stories, and we wanted a story of hope. And we saw this article in the New York Times about the sisterhood, and we were just giddy with joy and said, okay, there is this movement, like something is happening in people's living rooms. And it felt really different kind of story than kind of the rallies and the, you know, which are all important, but this felt like a different story and an untold story. So we we're grateful that Sheryl and Atiya took our phone call. So
you. Yeah, persistence pays off. I heard that 3 times Sheryl had to call Atiya.
And when Kirsten first emailed and then called, I thought, is this a phony phone call? Like, is this real? They really want to do a film about us? And I talked to Atiya and we said, oh my gosh. And the rest is history.
I think it's I mean, for me, unimaginable that someone would film some work that I'm doing and that we're doing. And it was, I think, also a leap of faith for us to trust the story that Kirsten and Kelly were going to come up with, because they did record us, I guess, for almost 3 years. And that's a lot of hours of footage. And I remember thinking when I had the microphone, you know, clipped to my belt, like, oh my God, everything I'm saying is being recorded. It's kind of creepy. But we had absolute faith in what they were going to pull together. And I am watching the film again, I'm always amazed by how they were able to see that thread through all those hours of recording and come up with this beautiful story. And I think that's amazing. And I, of course, I'm going to, you know, to me, it highlights the best of what we're doing at the Sisterhood. But I mean, it was a relationship that we created over those years of, you know, trust and to this point, friendship, you know, so.
Absolutely. And I was just going to say, at the beginning, the very beginning, and what you saw where Atiya and I were welcoming people in response to the Muslim ban, that was the first time Kirsten and Katie filmed us.
Yep.
After that, we totally forgot about the filming, and Kirsten and Katie were our sisters just like everyone else. And we're experiencing everything we were experiencing.
Wow, that's amazing. The period of 3 years, I had not realized that was the length of filming. That's fascinating to think about the trust and rapport that you have to create to allow that story to come through. We're grateful that you all did. Thank you. So I want to ask, the second question is more about, you know, the work you're doing together has an inner and an outer aspect. And I want to ask, especially Atiya and Sheryl, what is the personal transformation look like for you in light of this work you've done together?
Sure.
Oh, you want me to go?
Mm-hmm.
It's been one of the, if not the most significant things I've done in my life. Having been in a leadership position for over 40 years, the most meaningful work that I ever did was the 10 years with the Sisterhood. And now, we're probably on about 12 years. For me, first of all, I have a sister that I never had, and Atiya is probably more of a sister than if she were my blood sister. She's my sister from another mother. And we've got over 4,000 sisters like that around the country. It's allowed me to learn more about myself, because as I learn more about my sisters and the way they practice their faith, Muslim as well as Jewish, I learn more about how I practice my faith and what I do. It's taught me so much more about Islam and Judaism. And I think the most important thing is, when I started the Sisterhood, I thought of my Jewish sisters and my Muslim sisters. It's transformed me to the way that I pray it will transform all our sisters, and they're my sisters. It's not Muslim, it's not Jewish, they're my sisters. I see the world through their eyes. I listen with my heart, not my ears. And I'm committed to changing the world with them. We have to make it a better place.
So I'm going to echo what Sheryl said. We've had a relationship for about 12 years now. And when we first met, I wanted to have nothing to do with interfaith. I had, I wouldn't say a negative experience, but let's just say not a positive experience with the interfaith work that I had been doing. I've been on the board at my mosque for over 20 years. I was chair of the board. It wasn't meaningful to me, the kind of, and I'm not saying there isn't a place for that. There's a place for that. So before anyone jumps on me, there's a place for it, but it wasn't meaningful to me. So when Sheryl approached me, you know, again, there's a common thread here. It was another leap of faith, getting out of your comfort zone. I had everything else to do than to say yes to this. But I understood that if Sheryl was extending her hand to me, I needed to take that hand. Despite the fact that I had, I didn't want to work in the interfaith area, despite the fact that, politically, I have been very staunch Palestinian rights activist. And these things were, at the forefront of my thoughts when I met with Sheryl. But when we met, it was just about two women together. As Sheryl says, we're sisters by choice. And we won't ever get to that point unless we get out of what is going on around us, that comfort, like we say, get out of your comfort zone. And it's only when we put ourselves in maybe uncomfortable, maybe difficult positions, do we grow. So absolutely, over the last 12 years, I have grown incredibly as a Muslim, as just a woman, as a friend, as a sister. I see the world very differently. I'm a lot more patient. I understand things with more wisdom. I understand we can't change the past if we're going to talk about political things or whatever. You can't change the past, but I can change what I do today. And there is a consequence to changing what I do today, not just for me, but for what's going on around me. And I do believe, and Sheryl and I always talk about this, you change one person, you change the world. It's that idea of one change can make a difference way beyond the world that you know. And I'm very, very committed to that. And I see it with my eyes over these 12 years.
Wow, thank you. So powerful. One person, one change, reaching out, saying yes. This is very rich and wise words. Before we move to the next question, Kirsten, is there anything you want to add to this? What's it like as the filmmaker? Was there some transformation for you?
Absolutely. I mean, Katie and I both, we were non-Muslim, non-Jewish. We both had grown up in predominantly Christian communities and households. And, I think we were both in awe that Sheryl and Atiya and so many of the sisters, we were able to get to a place of trust with that. And there was some honest conversations around that. And there were honest conversations in the edit room. And we had so many advisors, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, secular, along the way to really be able to give us feedback as we were making this. But, the whole process made me examine my own faith more deeply, being inspired by Sheryl, by Atiya, and so many of the sisters, and the conversations where the intentional listening and, being in living rooms and experiencing silence in a way that was curious and exploratory, not an immediate rush to prove a point or a religion or proselytizing, just a strength of curiosity, I guess, is what I just kept coming back to. And that's what we really tried to put in the film. And I think that was the most impactful thing to me to listen to in this time of very, very fraught division all around us. So I really thank, both of them for like the continued lessons that I keep learning, and I know others around me keep learning.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thanks to each of you for those responses. I'm going to pose one more question that we thought about before the viewing. And then I want to remind people you can put your questions in the Q&A. And after this, we're going to turn towards some of those questions that people are posing to the panelists. So the last question that I have for each of you is, how do we maintain and preserve relationships of solidarity where barriers or deep disagreements arise, or when they arise? And sort of what does it mean to you to be in solidarity with people rather than a cause or an ideology? Maybe that second part is a little piece of the answer to the first part, but I'd be curious to hear how you've navigated that over the years together.
Well, when Atiya and I started the Sisterhood, we made a commitment that we would not enter into challenging dialogue that could be divisive. We would first focus on really learning about each other, sharing our own personal stories about ourselves, our families, and most importantly, building trust and respect. Because until you have that trust and respect, you can't listen with your heart. You can't see the world through someone else's eyes. And you can't say, I've learned something. I don't necessarily agree with you, but I've grown so much from listening to you. I've learned something, and I am different today based on what you just shared with me. So we worked for almost 10 years, on probably 8 to 10 years, on making sure every sister built that trust and respect. Then we brought in several consultants and several peace building organizations in Israel and Palestine to work with the board. And then we made a commitment that we were going to provide the resources and the training to all our members, as well as experiences to all our members, to move down the path where it would be more difficult, specifically Israel and Palestine, but there were other things. And it's once you have that respect and trust, those barriers are turned into bridges, and you're able to see the world through each other's eyes and to respect it. Without that, you are divided.
I think there's so many ways to respond to that question, Jennifer. Like I agree with everything Sheryl said. I think there's a couple of things. One is we have never said that we are a type of interfaith organization where we come in. First of all, there's no preaching. We are not coming up and speaking, oh, this is what Islam is. Islam is, like we don't come in like that. We come in and say, this is how I live my faith. This is who I am as a Muslim. These are my values that I am espousing for my religion. And that's very different. That's very different. And we open our homes to each other. So we're kind of being vulnerable. Come into my home, see how I live, meet my family, and then we have conversations. We're in a space, it's now called brave space. We're in spaces that we can ask uncomfortable questions. And as Sheryl said, the point is you build trust over the time because you're meeting with the same women. Everyone, hopefully is coming at it with the same kind of curiosity, the same sense of wonderment, the same sense of wanting to learn. So, I think when you're coming at something with that type of a perspective, even if you disagree on something, you can disagree on something. But we built the trust over time. As an organization, when we finally formalized our organization as a nonprofit corporation, we had conferences every year. We had speakers talking about all sorts of issues, from faith issues, common faith issues, to Israel, Palestine, to activism, all sorts of topics. And then we also had building bridges trips together. And there's no better way to bond than to travel with somebody, right, Sheryl? I mean, those were like the most bonded experiences. And our experiences took us to a place where we finally got to talk about Israel, Palestine. We built up to it, whether that was visiting Bosnia, the site of genocide for Muslims, visiting Auschwitz together, visiting, going to Azerbaijan and meeting with Jewish communities, two of them who had been living there for hundreds of years side by side with Muslims today, not in history, but today, going on a civil rights tour together, which you saw in the film, visiting our last trip in person. We've had virtual trips, but our last trip in person was visiting the Arizona-Mexican border, the US-Mexican border, and seeing a wall, going through checkpoints. And then it just became a very natural progression to talk about the harder issues. But we built that trust, we built that understanding, and we took it in a way that it came from love. And even if we're going to disagree at the end of the day, that's okay. But I think we have to kind of get over that and say, you know what, maybe you're not on my team. Maybe you don't call yourself what I call myself, but I can still have a conversation with you because I understand that in reality, we do want the same things.
And we got to one last thing, Jennifer. Got to the point where we allow the sisters to really feel that they could celebrate their differences. These are a positive and something to celebrate and something to make you grow as an individual and to let your partner that you're in dialogue with and engagement with grow also. So it's a whole different way of framing it. And that's what's made us so strong.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, I love these themes of vulnerability and curiosity, building trust over time. These are the kinds of capacities that I think people interested in bridging some of the issues that divide us should be taking note of. They're very powerful tools. So I want to change course a little here, but turn to some questions from those who have been viewing the film and listening to the comments so far. And the first question that we have from one of our viewers is, what can Christians do to support this organization? It's different than Megan Kelly's question, which is Catholics, we want in. Wasn't really a question, but I think this is, a really interesting question that several people are probably holding. What do you say to Christians who are wondering how they can help this organization?
Want me to go? What I would say is that right now, it's probably the scariest time to be Jewish in America, and I would say in the world. And some of the scariest times to be Muslim in America. And having your neighbors reach out to you and acknowledge the fear and the hate, but show it through love, counter it through love, for our Jewish and Muslim sisters is needed so much right now. So that's number one. Number two, get out of your comfort zones. Go out and meet someone. They don't have to be Jewish or Muslim. They could be Hindu, they could be an atheist, but meet someone different from you. Break bread together. That's a key element. And open your homes, open your hearts, and it will change you and it will change them. As Atiya said, you change one person, you change the world. And then the final thing is, after watching the movie, I hope that if anyone had some negative perceptions, some negative stereotypes, that this has changed how you view. Our theory of change is based on contact effects and extended contact effects. And I know we don't have time to talk about it, but just the fact that you saw this movie and you understand how both faith groups are really based on protecting the stranger, on love and stopping hate. If you could mention that to someone else, just the fact that they're hearing that from you has been proven that will erode the hate they have.
Powerful.
And to add to that, I would just say a really awareness, understand that not everybody is celebrating Christmas. Not everybody is doing X, Y, and Z, that there are people who celebrate different things. And also I would just add that there's nuance. Not all Muslims are the same. Not all Jews are the same. And certainly not all Christians are the same. So, there's, I think we have to understand that there's nuance. Some of the most interesting discussions that we have had are our interfaith discussions amongst the Muslim sisters, amongst the Jewish sisters. So I think everyone needs to be aware of that, right? And I say this a lot, and I've said this to Sheryl before too, that just because you call yourself something, you may have actually values that align more with someone in a different faith. There are Muslim homes that I go to that I'm not comfortable going and praying at because the family doesn't pray. But when I go to Sheryl's house, I have a place in the corner in the living room that I go and pray, and I feel absolutely comfortable. So it's interesting that I think we need to get beyond our labels too.
Yeah, well said. Beautifully put. So let me ask another question from our participating audience. They start by saying, great and much needed film. Thank you for this work. My question as a male is, what has the male response to your work been from husbands, boyfriends, partners of the women in this? Is there a group of men doing this kind of work? And have you reached, well, I guess a secondary question from this same viewer is, have you reached out to Christian religions to educate them on this topic and involve them in your work? It's sort of multi-level question there.
Tia, I'll jump in and then. So there were 3 parts. I'll probably need help remembering them. The first is the male response on the males in our life. In our charter chapter, we are sisters and brothers and children, and we're one family. I will say that Atiya and Atiya's husband are absolutely the most important family members outside of my immediate family that we could have. And when my husband was critically ill, the first person that we called was Atiya's husband, who's a doctor. And the only person I wanted at my husband's side was Amar, because I knew he was family and he would save my husband's life. I don't know how to describe the impact that we've had with my sister's husbands greater than that statement. Are there other men involved in the sisterhood doing something like this? There are 2 or 3 chapters where the male spouses have said, this isn't fair, we want to do this, and they've started it on their own. And they've developed very deep relationships. I can tell you it's very different than the way we approach relationships, and that's okay, and it's great for them. And the third question was, I'm sorry, Jennifer.
The third question was about sort of educating Christian groups about the work you do and involving them.
We encourage, well, several ways. One, we encourage our chapters to go out to churches, to schools, and give that education, and to educate others, again, based on extended contact effects. We know it's the best way when people hear the story of the sisterhood. And with these 2 little people, Atiya and myself did, to create this movement, and how simple it was. It was simple that everyone could do this, and we know it'll change perceptions of hate. And we are so thankful to Kirsten and Katie, because one of the most powerful ways to share our story of the sisterhood is through this film. So one of the things we would ask those that are viewing this is, please take this out to your individual communities. And please share this. It's a message right now the world needs to hear.
Yeah, and we have actually had opportunities to screen it in front of several Christian groups. Sheryl and I have spoken on panels with them as well. So I think, yes, number one, as allies, we educate ourselves, and also if you could take the film to your group, we would be happy to be panelists there and spread the message. So.
I'll just jump in with, one seemingly simple thing that I really took from Sheryl and Atiya. I remember some of our first filming conversations, and they were both talking about these moments where, it was you, Sheryl, who said there was a point where, you were asking, look around, who are your friends? Who have you intentionally grown relationships with? And make a concerted effort. And I think it's even beyond getting out of your comfort zone, because it's like, making efforts that go into some different places. I think schools are an amazing place to begin those relationships through your kids. I mean, it's been amazing to me, like my 10-year-old, has an education at school because our school district takes off Ramadan, or it has Eid, has Lunar New Year, has Yom Kippur off, and all of those are moments of education for youth. And even if your school system doesn't do that, or if you're going to a particularly, religious school, that education and those talks at home really set the scene for that. And that's been a beautiful gift that this film has given my family.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question, there's sort of a cluster of questions that are related to the broader question of how do you start a group? Is it possible to start one here? Is there one here? Where are the groups? I'm imagining we can put some information in the chat at the end about that. But if there's anything in general that you want to add about that topic, feel free to weigh in.
You could put information on there, and they, at the Office of the Sisterhood, they will put you in touch with someone who can help anyone start a chapter. There's resources online, how to start a chapter. And the main guidance we give is, you want the chapters to be as diverse as possible so that you could share as many stories and represent whole communities, but as close and small as possible so that that intimacy of gaining respect and trust. is there.
Mm,
And it's self-selecting again.
yeah, nice. Atiya, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I mean, again, we're excited. And the more the merrier. So please join us. We're looking, there's many ways to participate, whether that's participating by forming a chapter, coming to our conference. It's been virtual for the past 2 years, and that's at the end of the year. Hopefully, we just actually finished our virtual trip to Israel, Palestine. That finished about 2 weeks ago. It was 5 weeks. We're hoping to do an in-person trip, but we're all waiting to know if that's possible. So there's many ways that one can participate with the sisterhood. So, please check out our website. I put the website in the chat, to find out what works for you. So the tent is open.
Atiya said something really important that's why you're my partner, that I needed to mention. We have 2 types of members. We have chapter members, but chapters aren't for everyone. And sometimes it's hard to get a chapter going in a community. We have community members. And at least once a month, we have a program online, break out after the program into groups to meet one another and share. Community member. If you can't become a chapter member, become a community member. And more, we are opening things like the virtual trip to Israel and Palestine to full communities, regardless of gender affiliation, regardless of faith affiliation. So please check us out.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. The next question is about the young woman who went into the classroom of children and looks so happy to be doing this work. So the questions are, how did that happen? Was that a public school, a religious school, or some other program?
Just a quick story about those 4 women. They're 2 sets of twins. They started our first teenage chapter because I can't remember if it was which twins' home the meeting was in that night, but they came down and invited
So their moms are in a chapter together.
Their moms are in a chapter together, and they were in the film. Moms.
Yeah.
And they said, we're sitting here in this room. We are part of your chapter. And if you want us to be part of your chapter, then we're starting our own. And their mom said, so go start your own. How it started those girls. And one of the things we've encouraged our teens is to go out into schools. It's much easier to go into religious institutions. So either a Jewish or Islamic day school or a supplemental school than it is to be able to get approval to go into public schools, unfortunately. But we encourage them to go into schools because imagine the impact. Here come these cool looking girls that seem like so much fun and so much energy. They're going to listen to the girls more than they're going to listen to a grandma or a mother or whatever. So that we know the impact is just huge. So we encourage all of our teen chapters to, prior to COVID, to make this something that they all commit to do.
Beautiful.
Sheryl, I'll just jump in. One of the surprises that we've had on the journey of this film at Odyssey is that more and more corporations have been bringing the film into their DE&I work. So conversations around diversity are now more than ever including religious diversity as part of that education. And I see that starting to shift with universities as well. I see it starting with some public schools already, that those conversations around diversity need to include religious diversity as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. So a little time check. We just have about 5 minutes left before we want to do some closing and some housekeeping. There's a question here. I'm going to sort of paraphrase it. It's about the right-left divide and wondering, there were comments about, we sort of may all agree in this group, but the question is about whether is the dial greater toward the left, and has there been reaching out toward the right, or how does that work in the groups?
Because we're a self-selecting group, it's probably not surprising that we are centrist or toward the left, more so than to the right. That being said, we do have some women who do lean to the right. we have some Orthodox Jewish women who do lean to the right, but just because someone leans to the right, and this is the crux of it, because someone leans to the right doesn't mean that they don't promote peace and love and respect and diversity. And so, yes, we hear about people on the right and people on the left and right wingers, and me personally, it brings up very negative feelings and very scary feelings. But I would encourage us to say, just because someone is on the right, I would love to invite every right winger in my community to come spend Shabbat Friday night dinner with me, and let's break bread together and tell me what you believe in and why you believe in it, and let me share it with you. And I can promise you, we will all be changed, and any hate that is there will start to be eroded. And so I think that's important. But to answer the question, yes, we are much more centrist to centrist left to very left.
But does anyone want to add to that?
I think that's just a challenge, and in many environments, because again, we are self-selected. Who are the people who want to talk about these issues? And so, it comes sadly from a certain pool of people. But as we always say, our tent is open. Come on in. And just because you might be conservative on some points, but you may be liberal on some. These are all these labels that we put. Let's, come as you are, and let's talk.
Yeah, I think that goes back to let's get out of those boxes we sometimes put ourselves in, when one header seems to define the whole gamut of what we might think or believe, which just doesn't hold up. It's not. And
it goes again to, like, even I talked about the interfaith issues. We have some big divisions amongst our own religious affiliations. And sometimes very conservative Jewish women may connect more with very conservative Muslim women. And again, I hate to use the word conservative. I mean, maybe traditional. I'm never comfortable with that word conservative, but you'll see alignments are very different. And that's something that I think we should be mindful of.
Yeah, well said. Any last words on this? There is one last question in the chat that I think we have just a couple minutes, but you're so good at being sort of clear and concise, I might as well add this into the mix. So the question is, can you talk about the role of vulnerability in taking this work into your homes? Tia mentioned this a little, and there's a question. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah. Well, again, I think that, Sheryl and I have said from the beginning, we are two women of faith. We practice our religion. We believe in our religion. We've learned so much about our own religions being part of this. And I think part of that is that leap of faith of opening your heart, opening your home. It is vulnerable. You don't know someone who comes into your home, but at the same time, what choice do we have? We live in a pluralist country, right? Where are we going from here? So I think that we have to do these things. I feel like as a Muslim woman, you look at many of the studies that were out there that, you're more likely, if you know a Muslim person, to have favorable views of a Muslim person, right? These are many of these type of studies came out in the last several years. So who am I why should I not in other words, I have my own self-interest also. Like, sometimes you have to convince people by saying, what is good for you? So, if you're one of those people, it's good for you too. So, there's many ways to skin the cat. So I think that we have to, talk about it in ways that affect different sorts of people. There's always people who are like, I'd love to meet new people. I'm excited to meet someone different and talk about religion or talk about whatever. But then there's some people who you kind of have to say, maybe this is in your best interest to be part of this.
Yeah.
Maybe it's your religious duty to be part of it. I mean, again, it's talking to different people in different ways.
The other, just 2 comments about that. Atiya and I decided we were going to meet in each other's homes for some really key reasons. One is, what better way for people to learn about one another than to look on the wall and say, oh, is that in Arabic or is that in Hebrew? What does it say? And then to hear, oh my God, I have almost the same thing, but it's in this language. Or what is that? Is that a ritual object? What is it? It's a great way to learn. And the other huge benefit is when there are family members living in the house. For those family members to see the sisters hugging and kissing and squealing because they haven't seen each other in a while and they're so excited, what message does that give to the family members? It's fabulous.
Yeah. Oh my
And
God.
Jennifer, I'm just gonna, one more thing. I know we were short on time.
Oh, please.
You know, like I said, I've been on the board at my mosque, very involved in my community. My parents are founding members. Sheryl is married to a rabbi, a mother of 2 rabbis. But yet, even though we are so involved in with our religious institutions, we're like, that is not the place for this. Because quite often, you know, and Sheryl, I don't know if you remember this, we had a conference once where we had an opportunity for everyone to go to Jummah prayer. So we all went for Friday Jummah prayer at the mosque. And inevitably, the religious, a male religious person will come in and kind of take everything over. You know, there's always that kind of situation where we felt like, you know, we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Great
This
point.
is like women power.
I will just note the mutual vulnerability of not just being host and inviting people into your house, but allowing yourself to be hosted and going into others' houses. I think that the mutuality you weave into your design is really powerful and really important. So on that note,
Hi, Cheryl's mom.
I want to thank
Thank you. Good to see
Good to
you,
see
Atiya. Like I said, our families, each other's
family
families.
connections.
What a beautiful way to close our time.
Yes.
Well, friends, I just want to say now is the time to be watching the chat, because to many of those questions that were offered in the Q&A and that we've talked about here, the answers will be found in the links that are going to be appearing there rapidly. Special thanks to our program manager, Zahabia Ahmed Usmani, who is taking care of all the technical hurdles of getting that all in place. So as we close out our time together, again, on behalf of the Kaufman Interfaith Institute, thank you for attending this screening and discussion of Stranger Sister. Special thanks to Odyssey Impact, the Argosy Foundation, and the Weggy Foundation for underwriting this event. And thank you to our panelists and moderator for your wisdom, insight, and most importantly, your work. We kindly ask that you take a quick couple of minutes to complete our feedback survey. It's available in the chat and will be emailed to you after the conclusion of this event. If you have interest in bringing this film to other groups or your congregation, Odyssey Impact would love to work with you to make this happen. Again, there will be links in the chat and sent to you afterwards where you can connect and we can make that happen. Again, we've shared a couple of times the website for Sisterhood of Salaam Shalom. That will be in the chat as well if you're interested in learning more. We'd also like to let folks know that if you are looking for next steps in terms of understanding bridge building and solidarity, the Kaufman Interfaith Institute is offering a training conference in partnership with the Shoulder to Shoulder campaign on March 18th and 19th, specifically on coming alongside of our Muslim neighbors. This conference will be offered both virtually and in person, so no matter where you are this evening, you are welcome to join us. Info can be found on the Kaufman Institute website, or again, by clicking the link that should appear in the chat. The Kaufman Institute, as always, is proud to offer a wide variety of events and resources to foster cross-cultural engagement and cooperation between people of diverse religious, spiritual, and secular backgrounds. I would also add to that ages, as well as we offer very dynamic interfaith youth programming as well. Certainly we saw the value of that in this documentary. I invite you to explore our upcoming events and sign up for our weekly e-newsletter at our website, www.interfaithunderstanding.org, or follow us on the socials at Kaufman Interfaith Institute or at GR Interfaith. Thank you all so much for attending. To our panelists and moderator, once again, it was wonderful to have you here. Thank you for all you are doing to make your communities and our world a better and safer place for everyone. Have a wonderful night, all. It was delightful to see you.
Thank you. Take care,
Thank you,
everyone.
thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.